Drum roll, please. Drum roll, please. Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek from the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on volume 26, the final volume of Mushoku Tensei's mainline series. As like usual, we will get into all the other side stuff. We'll get into Roxy Gets Serious. We'll get into the Edis manga. We're going to do all of it. But for the mainline series, this is the final volume of the franchise, and I could not be more excited to crack this sucker open and get right into it. But yes, we're starting off with chapter 1, of course. But yes, as per usual, thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday after Mushoku Monday, as well as a great week after everything concludes. As per usual, greatly appreciate your guys' support through this entire journey, your kind words, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. It's because of you guys this has grown into what has grown into, and it's been much more exciting and much more crazier than I thought it would originally be when I first started the whole thing. Yes, back when we used to have like 10-minute long Mushoku Mondays. They weren't technically Mushoku Monday back then, but anyways, as per usual, greatly appreciate everybody that support channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. Orsted Cultist with 15 months. Thank you so much for the long time support. Noah with a massive super. Thank you so much, Noah. Thank you. And Rose Moise with a super. Thank you guys so much. You guys mean so much to me. With all that said, with all the delays out of the way, let's just get into this. Let's just start into this whole thing. Yes, things aren't going really great. Already things aren't going great. Things are not going great already. But yes, chapter 1, the threat of the fighting god. Get an Alex, a Sandor perspective chapter. I was kind of not expecting this, but at the same time, we're going towards his death. We'll see. Alex Kalman Ryback is the son of the North god Kalman by blood, heir to his arts and his name. They didn't refer to his father by a number. They just called him North God Kalman. Well, that makes sense. As the North God Kalman II, Alex traveled the world on a quest to become a true hero, to bring glory to the name of Kalman. He defeated dragons, a gargantuan behemoth, an evil priest who seized control of a nation, a giant man-eating monkey that haunted the hinterlands of the central continent, as well as a foolish tyrant and a guardian of the labyrinth that had wiped out many clans of the central continent. I'm kind of curious. I don't recall of them mentioning anything about like an evil priest who seeks control of a nation. I don't know that they've ever referenced it. I mean, they may probably name drop the person at some point, but I don't recall that. They did, of course, get into the behemoth several times. They got into the behemoth several times. With the world's strongest magic sword and physical toughness from his mother, and the ultimate sword fighting techniques developed by his father. This was actually a surprise. I'm recalling this now. This was actually a big surprise getting to North God style, which now granted, it was starting to build up into this, really getting into the Kalmans, but this really cemented it for me that I find the North God style, which I've already did before, I find the North God style to be very fascinating. And that's probably because, yes, over here, the Sword God style is literally just charge in and slice as fast as possible. It's pretty basic. It's the greatest defense is a good offense. I kind of like the Water God style. I've always liked the concept of counters. Whenever I'm playing a game that has some sort of counter system, I love it. For example, Virtua Fighter. I loved Pi. I thought Pi was a really interesting character because it was always like just basically throwing everybody's attacks back at them. I love counters. But the North God style obviously being very kind of, again, tricks the trade. Everything that you have possible at your disposal, use it. If you got to pick up a handful of sand to kill somebody, do it. But it gets more into the idea of sort of what it kind of offsets, which I thought was very fascinating. He destroyed anyone who stood against him. He gained the reputation of the strongest swordsman around. That won him the people's gratitude and their highest esteem. Thanks to his immortal demon blood, he retained his vigor and was able to continue as a hero. Even though long years went by, he felt elated. As far as he was concerned, he was invincible. He went on crushing opponents, drunk on his own power. One moment stood out, a moment that convinced him that he was a hero. Finally, right here, we're getting a confirmation on exactly what the effects of, again, technically being Atofe's son has for him. Again, it kind of gives the indication that he's not immortal, but it at least allows him to live for a long time. I think they get into later on that he's lived at least 100 years. Now, that's weird. I didn't notice this until, yes, now that I know what happens right after this statement. It says one moment stood out, a moment that convinced me that I was a hero, but the story that we're getting to in a minute here is what proved him that he wasn't a hero. So I'm wondering if that's a typo. Do we already have our first 7 C's moment? Let's read the next part. Maybe it makes sense and maybe I'm forgetting. One day on the road, a young boy, not even of age yet, stole his magic sword. He took it to a backstreet tavern full of washed-up nobodies. Their leader, a sword saint, picked up the sword. Usually, Alex would have wiped the floor with a sword saint with his bare hands. However, the fearsome power of the magic sword elevated the abilities of that washed-up nobody to emperor power, perhaps greater. Again, signs the sword is super massively OP. They cannot help but prove how OP this sword is. Which makes me think that Rudius might end up actually carrying it. Like, just swing the thing. And it might be where he finally uses gravity magic himself. It didn't matter that it was the first time that he ever picked it up. Alex barely managed to defeat him. It left him shaken, and made him question if he was truly strong. While Alex stood there shocked, the swordsman said, "It's all your fault these parts are such a mess." That jogged his memory. He was in the country where he defeated the evil priest who seized power and the foolish despot. The priest was evil, but the religion kept the nation stable. The king had been a tyrant, but his iron rule had preserved the national unity. Things were different now. These lands were known as the conflict zone. The origins of the conflict zone? The origins of the conflict zone? I seem to remember, at least with the King Dragon Realm, they were mentioning the idea that they were trying to get up there, but the other nations were saying, stop, don't move any further. Like, they didn't want them to gain too much power. And it made a lot of sense there, but I guess they never really got into the conflict zone from, like, the origin point. Yes, they've gotten to several times where the idea that this is an area that is lush, and a lot of people want it, and thus there's a lot of people that constantly pop up to try to seize that area because of its resources and whatnot, you assume. But yeah, this kind of implies that he started it. This kind of implies that he started it, that he's been around so long that back here there was a point in which this used to be stable. This place used to have a kingdom that was flourishing and working, yes, ruled by some nasty powers, but it kept it under control, and he broke it. Which, that's kind of a sad reality there. The idea that you're assuming, yeah, these are some bad leaders. I got to be a hero to save them all. I'm going to step in there and I'm going to save everybody. But no, it's literally the lesser of two evils situation. That's literally what it's laying out. The lesser of two evils. You either leave this tyrant on the throne, this evil priest that's controlling them from the backgrounds, and how evil they are. But technically, while some people are struggling, while there is some negative aspects to it, it's better than destroying that, and then all of the control and all of the structure is gone, and now everybody's just cutting each other up. It's a lesser of two evils. Once one great nation, it was now divided into multiple smaller countries, all fighting amongst themselves. As one fell, another was born in an endless cycle. All were bogged down in war, in which not even the victors were spared. Larger nations went on preying upon them, and people went on dying. I wonder what... Is Ariel over there going, achoo? Man, somebody's talking about me. My ears are ringing. People went on dying, and Alex felt at fault. He decided their ruler was evil and defeated him without considering what others thought. Yeah, it's literally as a hero, as this self-defined hero, he was deciding what was heroic feats. He was the judge, jury, and executioner. And with that comes extreme responsibility that you're doing your best to make sure that that's what people actually want. He robbed them of their peace, and he was left questioning if he really was a hero. Yeah, here's where I question, is this what it meant to say back here? One moment stood out, a moment that convinced me that I was a hero. I think it's the moment that convinced me I wasn't a hero. Damn it, Seven Seas. For some time, he carried these questions with him, put down the magic sword, and gave up being a hero. In other words, the answer that he arrived to both questions was no. Basically, I'm not truly strong, and no, I'm not a hero. Because not only is he destroying and causing nothing but havoc, but additionally, all of his powers from that sword. This sword saint dude picked up that sword and I barely beat him. That's proof that that sword is where all my power is. Now, granted, that's like a reverse effect. That is sort of like a reverse effect where not only is it boosting you up, but now it's boosting him up. He loved heroes. Loved listening to heroic epics, found himself wanting to be like them. Alas, he didn't have talent for heroism. He still liked to think that with some luck, when the moment finally came, maybe. Now here's the problem with this mindset. It's assuming that everybody else that did heroic acts didn't face the same problems. I think that is sort of a downfall to kind of fall into. I couldn't pull it off. And I'm really applying this to life experiences and the idea of you try something and it fails and you just assume that you ain't got what it takes. But it's also important to note that those that pull it off, it's not as if they were flawless at it and they didn't struggle at the same time. It's important to keep things in perspective. When he gave up on heroism, he stopped straining himself into the hero mold. He traded his sword for his staff and focused his efforts on training others. He chose a staff because he thought it was the best of all weapons. Simple, can be found anywhere. It goes back to the whole idea, like you can go to some place and get a staff from like, I don't know, a shepherd or something like that. And it didn't matter if it was stolen. It was only as good as you were as a fighter. From a tactical perspective, it had the advantage of being longer than a sword. Honestly, anything was fine for Alex, as long as it wasn't a magic sword. Totally going all the way back. But again, I do appreciate this concept here. This idea that I was relying on that sword for so long, and I finally picked up a staff, and I seen how truly strong I was, and it's able to push you. Because I think there is an element, and I was kind of hoping they would get into it quite a bit with Alec in this perspective. And the idea that because you were so reliant on that for so long, you finally don't have it in your hand, and suddenly you're weak. They're getting into it with here. The idea of him getting beat up by a sword saint. Somebody that normally I could have beat with my bare hands. But then he carried the sword and showed me how powerful it is. As to why he wanted to train others, it was a desire to atone for his sins. It seemed to him that he'd been horribly contemptuous of people around him. Not that he thought of them as expendable. He had deluded himself into thinking that he was the protagonist. Sounds familiar. This whole time I was making fun of Alec for this, and it's here, which is why he found it easy to call people evil and pass judgment. Hold on. Never considering the consequences, it's mortifying to recall. Everyone is a protagonist in their own life. Everyone has their own desires. Everyone is their own main character. Again, I love this idea of somebody believing they're so freaking important. It's narcissistic or whatever. This idea that, yes, I am the main character. But that's an interesting way of looking at it. Because you put yourself in the position of believing that you're the protagonist, because you're so narcissistic, because you believe you're the main character of the world, it makes you believe that your thought processes and your judgments are more important than others, and that you're more important than them, and that you have the right to judge them. Because he admired heroes so much, Alec's deeds seemed righteous. But the truth wasn't so grandiose. He was no different from the rulers that he struck down. His dream of becoming a hero was, in short, mere ambition. It was when he realized this that he started to think it would be better to be a supporting character in a true hero story, rather than a hero in his own right. That was how it was with his father, North God Kalman. He fought alongside the dragon god Utapin and the armored dragon king Pedagus as one of the 3 god slayers. But if you think of a story like that, he wasn't the protagonist. He'd always be the protagonist in Alex's eyes, but his perspective wasn't the only one. Alex tried to put him in the same position, though he'd admit he also thought being a mentor to a hero sounded pretty smooth. Yeah, that's something they keep getting into the idea, and that's literally what created the idea of what Kalman II wanted to do and what Kalman III wanted to do. This idea that, man, he did incredible things, but nobody talks about him. In all the stories, everybody's talking about Pedagus. Everybody's talking about Utapin. Nobody talks about Kalman I. And so, yes, it makes sense to him right here, even though it is called the 3 God Slayers. The 3 God Slayers, he wasn't that important in the story, even though he did so much great stuff. So it makes sense right here where he comes to the conclusion that since he wasn't really told that big and he was very important, maybe I should put myself in that position. Maybe that's where I should be. Taking on all those students turned out to be unexpectedly interesting. It gave him a glimpse into how much more there was to the North God style. Things he had never realized. Some warriors were born with physical disadvantages. Some lost their arms, were blind since birth, but they all devised their own workarounds, carved their own ways to win. The North God style that Alex had learned was what his father taught his mother. Immortal demon sword fighting relies on brute force, employing their immortality. So that's what Alex thought the North God style was all about. But really, North God style was created so that those without strength or had lost something could still survive in a battlefield. It was taking on all those students that taught him that. Things that he thought he understood came into real focus. His perspective broadened, and he won the respect of many. That is so freaking cool. I'm sorry, I geek out on this stuff. Like I said, I geek out on this stuff. I love this stuff. This opens a door so much and makes so much sense. Again, with the Sword God style, it is a good defense, it's a good offense. Fast, powerful, quick as possible. The first one to end it, the first one to swing their sword wins. That's all they're about. Then you have the Water God style. It's always about counters. Wait for your opponent, wait for them to strike, counter. Wait for the strike, counter. Footwork. Where are you coming from? Which direction are you coming from? North God style. It was always about tricks. I think even Paul didn't like the idea of North God style. It's so much about tricks. It's North God style. I don't think they've ever said this, which is very, very interesting. They've never really said this, but it gives you a feeling of it based on how Paul talked about it. It's dishonorable. It's trickery. They cheat, basically. They're a cheating style. It's throwing sand in people's eyes. It's about spitting in their face to distract them. It's parlor tricks. That kind of stuff. And as Rudy puts it later on whenever he faces off against Auber, it was all about like he's like a ninja. And right there, it was kind of turning in this idea of like, oh wow, is the Northgard style created by a ninja from our world? Ooh, cool idea here. They're ninjas. Here it's saying there's a reason for all that. There's a reason why there's tricks. There's a reason why there's things that seem dishonorable. Is it because somebody had to do something to offset something? I was missing an arm, so I had to learn how to fight with the blade in my teeth. And then somebody picks up on that technique and now suddenly they're swinging around 3 swords. It's the idea of a blind person learning how to hear better. Thus they have a really heightened sense of hearing and they're able to do some really weird tricks with it. They might have missing leg, so they had to learn how to move quickly or maybe probably transport themselves with a magic item or something like that. It's always finding some way around a disability. It's finding a way around your shortcomings. And it turns into an idea of trickery in the end. It's cool stuff. Again, I love this stuff. I guess I should have expected eventually us getting into the Northgard style. So that does make me really happy that we've technically gone into all 3 styles. Through storytelling with each individual, we've kind of solidified sort of the basis of each of these styles. With the Sword God style, obviously, we got it through the perspective of Galfalion and Edis. With the Water God style, we got it through Rada and Isolde. And then finally right here, even though we got a touch of it again with Auber, right here, we're finally getting into it with the Calvins. We're getting that perspective. But the other cool thing in this little segment right here is it getting into greater detail about why Alex got that wrong impression. And it seems to predicate around him observing his mother. It gives me a feeling here that yes, it was taught to his mother, and that became sort of the style for the immortal demons, and that's possibly where he got that wrong impression about what it's about. He watched his mother, and she's using the Northgard style, and she's a brute. So obviously I thought it was all about strength. I thought it was strength. Specifically, Northgard style that Alex had learned was what his father taught his mother. And yes, with her brute force and employing immortality, it got him the wrong impression about what it was. Because everybody else that uses Northgard style has to use it to offset something in a lot of cases. With her, because if she loses an arm, it comes back, she's just employing her immortality. She's just rushing in there. She doesn't care if she loses an arm. Everybody else is going to be kind of defensive. So it's interesting that that sort of is showing why he gets that wrong impression. And then guess what happens after that? His son, seeing what his father did, gets the wrong impression too. It's showing that domino effect, which is really cool. I love that stuff. Going back a little bit, things he thought he understood came into real focus. His perspective broadened, and he won the respect of many. The respect was a little mellower than what he had experienced as a hero, but for some reason, it made him happier. Yeah, I think because it's only giving and it's not breaking things. Typically with being a hero, you're going to break something in order to help somebody, and that can cause problems for other people. He'd only come to use his staff to avoid using anything like a magic sword. He grew proud of it, his weapon of choice. He realized he'd become steadfast in living his father's philosophy. The thought brought tears to his eyes. After that, he became less interested in doing heroic deeds himself. Later, he ended up in the service of Queen Ariel. In her, he saw the same qualities he had seen in the hero king, Gaunus. Cool. That's pretty cool. That brought a smile on my face. Yes, for those that don't remember, this is the king that she was supposedly trying to become similar to in order to win over Petagus. This was like sort of the beacon of what a king was. The one that came into power at the wake of the Laplace War. So it kind of is what the thing that Ariel was sort of striving for. He immediately sees it. Now, it doesn't imply the idea that he knew that that's what she was going for. Just the fact that that's what it seemed like she was. She has the same qualities as him. Not that she achieved that and thus, yeah, technically. It's pretty cool. His assessment wasn't wrong. Before he knew it, she had assembled a group of remarkable advisors and laid a rock-solid foundation for governance of Osra. Despite this team that she assembled, she didn't start any wars. Seemed like you were causing some conflict, but yeah, I guess so. Instead, she sought out making policies to increase national prosperity. She invested a particularly large amount into magical technology and appointed young people to her ministries. When Alex asked her why she was doing so much despite opposition, her answer was surprising. She told him she was doing what she could in her lifetime to oppose Laplace, when he resurrected some decades hence. She was truly a great ruler. He couldn't have chosen a better master. So at least it implies right here that she didn't win him over, which I guess technically, if you think about it, it's probably a good thing. Like, nothing in there said anything about her being beautiful, about her voice capturing him. None of that. Simply, I seen the hero King Gaunus in her, and she was laying this great foundation. Nothing about love, nothing about Doki Dokis, which again is technically a good thing because, you know, I don't know if they've ever mentioned her, but you assume that he had to make a baby somehow. So there is a woman in his life. But yeah, this is implying that it's purely by her actions that won him over. It wasn't the typical charm that everybody else has to deal with. And I assume that was the case, that he just was captivated by her charms like everybody else is. Pretty cool. But yes, so he thought. Only when he poked around some more himself, he noticed the shady character scurrying around in Ariel's shadow. That somebody, that little cockroach, is Rudy as Grey Rat. It didn't take Alex long to work out he was a follower of the Dragon God. Ariel was happy to tell Alex the whole story. The fact that she peed herself right in front of the man, and how she enjoyed it. I'm joking. I had to do it. She said the Dragon God Orsted was supporting her. Alex had heard of Orsted's unsavory reputation. One person said that he turned his ally into a donut without warning. One person said that he stabbed his ally through the heart without warning. Another said he pushed him off a cliff. Another said he snatched the prize that they were after out from under their nose. Another said that he stole a magic item that they got their hands on. Alex didn't pay much heed to reports from onlookers, but every story that he chanced upon repeated his misdeeds. Yeah, this is obviously immediately clicks for me. These are things that he's doing in order to offset something in the future. Yeah, the idea of pushing him off a cliff wasn't that he was probably trying to kill, because they didn't die. If Orsted wanted to kill the person, he'd kill them. But the fact that the person says firsthand, he pushed me off a cliff, probably to prevent something. That's a butterfly effect. If I can push him off the cliff here, he won't be a disciple of the man god here or something like that. He won't buy this person from trafficking and use them or whatever. But it's just funny to hear it all kind of laid out at once. Like all these comments from people like, yeah, one time he came up to me and he just bumped me in the shoulder with his fist. And I was like, what the hell was that for? And then he walked away. I don't know what he did that for. Alex had been in Orsted's presence on one occasion. Interesting. That kind of led me to my theory, because I thought when he first met him at the office, I was pretty sure that he had seen him before. And this is kind of confirming it, because later in this chapter it says that later on he went to work for him. Just one look at him struck fear in his heart. The Dragon God and the North God are sworn allies, and the bond of friendship between Kalman and Utapin will never be broken. It was unthinkable that Alex should feel fear towards the man who bore the name of the Dragon God, even as he was grateful to him. Alex wanted to nurture a friendship with this generation's Dragon God, yet he felt fear. I want to be his friend, just like Dad. He speculated that it was a curse that made everyone who saw him fear him. It wasn't until later that he learned that he was right. Because of that heavy curse, this was the first time Alex had encountered someone serving him. First impressions, Alex thought Rias Grey Rat was weak. I mean, you're not wrong. There was a cleverness in him, but it was more based on cunning than intelligence. He seemed trivial. After what Queen Ariel and Ghislaine told him, Alex expected someone impressive. But in person, he was fully mundane. Despite that, Rias didn't strike him as the type of weasel you often find toting up to great warriors or people of power. The contrast between the man and the esteem he inspired intrigued Alex. He wondered if Rias might actually turn out to be hero material. As such, when Queen Ariel sent him to be backup, Alex eagerly accepted the task. Again, not because he's charmed by Ariel, because he's intrigued by Rudius. Again, all my speculation about Ariel completely having him under her thumb is completely wrong, which is kind of funny to see now. They then took part in a thrilling battle, one that featured the Abyssal King, the Ogre God, the Sword God, and Alex's own son, North God Kalman III. It began with schemes smoldering, then exploding into open conflict. It was just like one of the battles from when Alex was trying to be a hero. Little did he know, it was far more than that. Enter the fighting god, the ultimate being who, long before the Laplace War, had ended the Second Great Human-Demon War. Alex never imagined it would turn out to be his uncle, Badigadi. Interesting that even he didn't know that. That was sort of a surprise to me. I assumed that this would be something that, again, would have been passed on to him from, like, stories from Atofe, stories from his father. Somebody would tell him that happened. At least Atofe, maybe at some point. But again, this kind of goes down that whole idea of, like, you just assume that Atofe was like any other mother. Is let's talk about stories about people and what's going on. No, let's fight. But thinking about it, it wasn't out of character. That musclehead was always acting like there was more to him than meets the eye. Alex's mother used to say, "Body puts on a smart guy act, but he's really a moron." I see it. I see it. Yep. Getting that impression from late recent. For once, words of wisdom from Atofe that I 100% agree. 100% agree. It's funny that it's turning into like that. I was talking last week because, of course, I was obviously ranting quite a bit about Badigadi and how much I cannot understand his character, and that I've pretty much given up on it. Like, I've come to accept that in the end, if I finish this volume and I'm like, I still don't understand, I've accepted it. I won't accept Body's character. Mainly because he's so smart. Like, this guy is incredibly smart. He understands people. He knows people better than Man God himself. He understands people. He understands mortals more than I think he gives off. And I think a lot of people downplay how smart Badigadi is. I think based on a lot of the internal struggles that he has, or at least internal thought process that he has, this dude is really smart. He understands a lot of stuff. He's witnessed a lot of stuff, and he seems to have a lot more input into feelings and mortals than I think people give him credit for. What was funny about all that discussion that we were having around people trying to explain to me what's going on with Body, and it really comes down to this idea that he's just an immortal demon. Shrug. But I don't really agree with that necessarily. I don't agree with shrugging that off, because I do believe that Refugian has done an incredible job of every single character that I have met in this series, that if the point is to kind of deep dive into their psyches and get to understand them, every single character, especially the villain characters, I've understood. I don't agree with why they're doing things. I don't think that it's right in a lot of cases, but I at least understand why they do what they do. They're understandable. Every single character, except for Badigadi. And the interesting thing is, even Atofe. Even Atofe, I understand. Yes, she's goofy. Yes, she's weird. But at least I understood how she clicked. I understood what she was doing. I understood how Rudy has had to win her over. All that stuff made sense to me in the end. Body's the only one that not. And so it's funny right here to hear him say that Atofe used to say, Body puts on a smart guy act, but he's really a moron. It's funny for me to actually agree with her that she is smarter than Body. Because at least there's logic to what she does. There is a through line and a logic to what Atofe does. Body, no. It's so funny. Anyways, that seemed opposite to Alex. Wasn't he putting on a moron act? Don't people think that you're an idiot because you get those backwards? But now that they've come to this juncture, Alex sort of got what she was coming from. A moron pretending to be clever. Yep. Back to the fight with Badigadi. That was it. That's our history of Alex. Like I said, I love this stuff. Again, especially getting into North God style. I love that stuff. That stuff I eat up. But again, to show why Alex went down that wrong path. We got why his son did it. Now we get to see why he did it. And it's really, again, around what seems like his mother and getting that wrong impression there, relying on that sword too much, realizing at some point it's not me that makes me strong, it's that damn sword, get rid of it. And then getting into the fulfillment that he got from actually training other people. And again, I think that's what he was desperately trying to tell his son. No, you got the wrong idea. Why you have that staff? Well, it's important to me. It's an important reason why I'm carrying the staff. And I feel a lot more fulfilled with it because I'm relying on my strength, not my weapon. It's getting a little answer into literally everything that we were getting from that conversation between the two of them. Cool stuff. But yeah, back to the fight with Badigadi. That's right, we're fighting Badigadi right now. If legends were true, he was the ultimate being, wreaking havoc during the Second Great Human-Demon War. That's interesting right there. That's implying that he believes that Badigadi was the one that was running around as Aldebaran. Because again, they claim that was the fighting god. That Aldebaran was the fighting god. But it doesn't seem like Alex himself knows that wasn't him taking down everybody
and then at some point, Badigadi took the armor and then took down Laplace. He wasn't wreaking havoc. He went straight from getting that armor straight down to the castle, if I remember correctly. Entrenching his position as the number 3 of the 7 great powers, facing him down, Alex couldn't see himself really having what it took to be a hero. No legendary being like the fighting god had never made an appearance in Alex's tales. There had been challenging opponents, and those with strength that impressed him. He held them in esteem. But after he picked up the magic sword, he'd never found an opponent that outclassed him. It wasn't until he set the sword down, his name, and his title, gave up on being a protagonist of his own story, and committed to fighting someone else's fight as a side character, that a legendary opponent finally appeared. Kind of regretting that now. I wish I still had... Hey, Rudius, I know I said I don't want it, but can I have it now? That's interesting. I mean, he eventually does pick up a magic sword, but it kind of makes me wonder if right here there is a sense of regret. Like, I kind of wish I had the sword now, but it sort of makes it feel like, no, this is what I want. This is what I want. I want to be the side character. He's literally committing. No, this is my position. This is what I'm supposed to do. That a legendary opponent finally appeared. Maybe Rudius Grey Rat was hero material. He probably wouldn't like Alex saying that. Nope. But that's what it's like for heroes. They encounter the enemy they're meant to defeat, and Alex encountered ones destined to take him down. You're a side character. You're cannon fodder. Things never turn out how you like. As Alex muttered, in his hand wasn't a magic sword, but an unremarkable staff. You couldn't ask for a weapon more unfit to go toe-to-toe with a fighting god. It wouldn't even make a good scene for a heroic epic that would be written later.
Bah! Such is nature of life and death.
That doesn't carry much weight coming from you.
Fie! Nothing in my life has turned out as I would have liked.
Is that right? Please, do tell me. I'm riveted. What is phi? I don't think I've literally ever heard anybody legit use phi. I've never seen that term used. I know what it is, but I've never, ever seen anybody use the word phi. It feels pretentious having it in there. I'm sorry. Back when Alex was trying to be a hero, he hadn't gone in for banter like this. He'd become a side character, even when their goals was simply to buy time. A legendary warrior strives for it as best as they can. Badigadi was the wise demon king. Contrary to his appearance, he was very learned, and he liked to impart knowledge. Alex saying that he was interested should be enough to get him talking. However, it wasn't to be. The monkey-faced demon at his side interrupted.
We ain't got time for that sort of thing. Come on, bud. Stomp that guy already and head after the boss.
Alex felt that he had seen this face before, but couldn't remember where. He didn't sense any threat in the way that he held himself. He didn't seem important at all. In his face, though, Alex saw extraordinary resolve. That wasn't so surprising, given he'd accompanied the fighting god into the battle. Yeah, that kind of stood out to me before, too, as Alex felt that he had seen this face before, but he couldn't remember where. I'm assuming that because it brings it up here, that maybe later on it'll bring it up. This idea that, oh, I remember because you caused this or caused that. It could be tied in with some of the stories that he talked about earlier, that he, take down this priest or whatever. It could have been at one point that was a case where he was told by geese or fed information from geese to take something down. And that literally feels like that. Because again, when he took down that priest and that ruler, what happened? It blew up in his face. I can see that totally being a plot by the man god. And he probably had geese tell him, go do this. And that blew up in his face because it was the man god's plot.
Blah! Very well. But this fellow here, he's a former hero. And he's got an ardent following across the world. You can't just treat him like a riffraff.
I know that, jeez. Only I know another thing, pal. The chance of the North God Kalman 2 beating fighting god Badigadi in this fight, they're pretty close to zilch.
Oh, zilch, is it?
Look, I know how it goes. The silver-tongued North God's gonna have you twisted around his little finger if you let him talk.
Bah! Never in my wildest dreams would I have been taken in by the likes of Alex.
Big talk from the guy who's gotten taken in by the likes of me.
There's no likes of about it. I'd take you and your resolve 1,000 times over that wishy-washy good for naught who ran around kicking up fuss about how he was going to be a hero until he ran into a setback, dropped the idea, and settled for a bit part.
Yeah, I would assume that the silver-tongued North God is going to have you twist around his finger if you let him talk. I'm assuming that was a little bit of a insight given by the man god. Don't let him talk. He's going to talk you into something. A little bit of advice there from the man god. But yeah, a little bit of a gut punch there, which is so interesting. There's no likes of about it. I'd take you on in your resolve 1,000 times over this wishy-washy good for naught who ran up kicking up a fuss until he was going to be a hero and then got a setback and then dropped the idea and settled for the bit part. And it's so funny because when Badigadi first met Rudius, he talked about a nephew that was always about fighting, and he was telling Rudius not to get caught up in it. It kind of seems like a little bit of a inconsistency, but it could be strictly on the idea of just not necessarily seeing that he got anything out of it because he gave it up. So it could be an idea that, yes, Badigadi was bestowing upon Rudius sort of what he experienced through watching Alex. I don't know. It seems weird because right here he's saying that it's a bad thing. It's saying a bad thing that he gave up on it. But again, it could just be an aspect of saying, I've seen this experience and I'm just going to pass on to you. Alex's plan failed. It hurt a little that his uncle thought of him as good for naught. He'd like to think that he'd put in some consideration into where he was now. More importantly, perhaps this meant the monkey-faced demon had made a more serious effort to woo his uncle. Alex figured that this was Geese. He'd have to watch out for him. He was the man Rudius Greyrat was hunting for.
Whoa, then prepare yourself.
Suddenly, the golden armor lurched towards Alex with ferocious power. He hadn't felt such raw might since he faced off against the King Dragon Blade Ch1 back before he had the magical sword. This could well be Alex's final fight. He might have been wanting for strength, but life was giving him a worthy rival. It was time to fight, and let the fight decide who he was. Come on then, I, Alex Ryback, North God Kalman II, shall be your opponent. I literally thought he was toast after that. But they keep teasing it. I think that's the struggling thing that I'm having right now, is that they keep cutting away, and Sanders left behind, and Sanders left behind, and this is probably it. And he's gonna die. I think right now, because they keep cutting away from him at that assumption of death, they can't do it now. They can't do it now. Have you ever been chewed up, tossed out like an old rag in a span of 5 minutes, adding insult to injury, having it happen when you've reached the venerable sort of age and been renowned as a teacher? Alex has. Right now, fighting god Badigadi was strong. This was his uncle who, every now and then, dropped cryptic comments with an air of significance about his past and his skills. Alex never thought that he would have been this tough. The only thing that Alex thought about when he sparred with his uncle in the past was that he might be a demon king, but he assumed that he was nothing compared to his mother. Atofe stronger. Yet now, in a few blows, Badigadi had snapped his staff in two and beat him to a pulp. Alex had been confident in his skills, with both staff and fists, but Badigadi had thrashed him as though the skills that he had honed over the past 100 years counted for nothing. This was the power of a fighting god. At first glance, you might think that he'd simply augmented his strength and speed. Exchanging blows with him revealed the unbelievable degree in which the armor had improved his defenses. Badigadi wouldn't be a force to challenge Alex with your average boosted armor. Alex could have taken him down empty-handed, whereas Badigadi wouldn't rival Alex under similar conditions. Thinking about it, that wasn't a surprise to Alex. Armor existed to protect you, as does defensive techniques. Putting on a suit of armor that enhanced your abilities would enhance that too. Add an insurmountable gap in fundamental power and speed on top of that, and your opponent is in a real fix. It's like a mouse trying to kill a dragon. The dragon might die from some poison or disease carried by the mouse, but alas, the person inside the armor now was more resistant to such things than anyone alive. Immortal demons don't die. Poison affects them, and they will fall ill, but neither will lead to death. Yeah, right here, and they get into a bit more later on when they're talking to Orsted, it's starting to really dig into what exactly this armor does. Alex does seem like right here, he is acknowledging the fact that if our positions were swapped, if I was in that armor and he was fighting against me, I'd be beating the crap out of him. Is at least acknowledging the idea that this is the armor. But of course, as it's getting into a little bit here and it gets into more later on, there is sort of an additional benefit to what Badigadi gets in there. And yes, the idea that if Alex was in that armor, he might not last very long. But because of how Badigadi physically is structured, and now inside this armor that normally would do all these bad things to the person inside the armor, he's able to offset all that stuff. He's basically becoming the ultimate being. The only problem that we are obviously hinting at, and Badigadi talked about in the last volume, and they get into it again here in a minute, is the idea of how long until he's mentally gone. Because that's the only side effect to any of this. Because right now he's the perfect being. The only side effect is that eventually he just loses himself. He's a ticking time bomb, basically. He's a ticking time bomb for himself and people around him. But I love the way that he puts that. Yeah, dragon fighting a mouse. Yeah, the mouse might poison him and the dragon could die from the mouse, even though the mouse is really weak. But this is a dragon that doesn't get affected by poison or disease. Alex had no means of doing harm to the fighting god's armor. If he had a magic sword, if he had the King Dragon Blade Ch1, he could have done something. But as Alex saw it, a true hero is one who uses his wits when they weren't strong enough. Not that he was the sharpest fellow. The blood of the infamous immortal demon king Atofe flowed through his veins. So there was no chance of that. He had his moments of ingenuity, but when push come to shove, he went in brute force. This is one of those kind of curses of family. Like, he just assumes, well, my mom's kind of crazy, so I guess I'm crazy too. It was no wonder that he ended up dependent on the magic sword and robbed people of peace. But that wouldn't pass muster this time. He had to do something, but he was at a loss. I guess that's kind of proof there. I didn't really think about that before. Is the idea of like, well, I'm not the sharpest fellow because I have the blood of my mom in me. And so I'm going to be dumb. And that's probably why I did all this stupid stuff. And that's probably why I did this. But you corrected course and you seem very sound of mind. Let's compare that to his son, who just basically did the same thing. It's not necessarily that you are dumb because you are the blood of your mom. It's more the fact of what you choose to do and how you act. You corrected your path. And your son's acting more like your mom than you are. So it's proof right there. As Alex called to his father in heaven for wisdom, he heard a familiar female voice. Let's go. Let's go. There was the immortal demon king Atofe, a little way above the rest of them. She wasn't alone. In the distance was a hulking figure, the ogre god. Somehow, Alex also sensed others hurrying to the scene. Come on, we should fall back in. Alex stopped himself. He knew that his mother wouldn't stop now that she heard the enemy was attacking. The ogre god would join in, as protecting this area was his life mission. If they fought, it would be bad if Alex didn't join them. As far as fighting power went, the three of them was amongst the greatest alive. Just then, something heavy crashed down in front of Alex. A woman, though somehow there was something a bit embarrassing about calling her a woman. It was his mother. The immortal demon king Atofe had arrived, swooping down with calculated drama. I freaking love Atofe. Oh, she's so great. It's like, Mom, you're embarrassing me, Mom. Mom, you're embarrassing me. Stop. It's like he's being dropped out at. It's like he's being dropped off at school. I'll back you up. As a rule, you couldn't go asking for all the reasons why his mother did what she did. Immortal demons as a species were all about acting on the spur of a moment, according to their own peculiar rules.
Bah, sister mine. This scoundrel just challenged me to single combat. Would you interfere in a duel between Demon King and Champion?
One of those rules were single combat to be observed without interference.
Is that true?
What? I never said that it was. Lying through your teeth was another skill fostered by the North God style. I freaking love that so much when I read that before. It was like, what? I never said it was a duel. What are you talking about? It's like totally breaking this, like... And again, technically, he's not an immortal demon. He has no reason to stick to this duel. Like, this is nothing to him. But it's like, well, did I technically say that? Are you sure that's exactly what I said? What? I never said it was.
He says he never said it. Bah, you really are a moron, sister of mine. Screw you, I'm not a moron.
Even if this hadn't been single combat, it wasn't like his mother offered backup to anyone. Perhaps to her, the fact that they were fighting a Demon King made her side with the champion's party. If that were so, this was unusual. Her Demon King role was a point of pride for her, one that she placed a lot of importance on. She'd rarely ever stepped away from that role until now. Maybe acting like Reese's familiar had wrought some change within her. Either that, or she had some history with a fighting god armor. I wonder... I literally wonder this. This is one of those ones where I think, like, I could probably make an entire freaking video on really kind of analyzing. Like, this is obviously playing into something I really badly want to do with all characters, is deep dive every character. The assumption here is that what really changed Atofe, and it kind of plays into what we were getting into before with the idea that when she first showed up, she chose to use the hostages. Normally, she would have dived in there and went right after the Ogre God. Let's fight. Let's do it. But then I struggled a little bit later on when she didn't bring somebody, or at least herself, go down there to fight Alec. It was like that whole thing where, like, it felt like she changed, but then it felt like she went back, ? But that was really his assumption. Alec was assuming that. She could have not gone down there for another reason. But right here, Alex is seeing a change in her. Normally, she wouldn't get involved. But maybe she's getting involved because she feels like she wants to fight on the champion's party. But this is not like her. Her pride typically keeps her from getting involved. She has placed so much importance on this whole system that she had. Why? Is it because she's acting as Rudy's familiar? Is it because she has a history with fighting god armor? Twofold. Actually, technically twofold. Rudy broke the thing that she was stuck on. She was stuck on experiencing this thing that all Demon Kings are supposed to do. Immortal Demon Kings do this. They wait for the champion, the hero, to show up. Then we have to make the princess over here. Let's put the princess inside the castle. All right, now you got to fight us. She was playing out that story that everybody told about her father, and then Rudius broke it. Because what happened right after Rudius fought her, she sat down. And she started talking normal. It was like this whole stage play that she had presented is finally over. The curtain came down. It was over. Now this is the real Atofe right here. Now this is the real her. She's still going to get those quirks in her, but I think a lot of the conventions and the rules and the molds that she set for herself, this is how it plays out, just like in the story, so that can be like father. All that stuff is finally gone, and she doesn't have to worry about it anymore. And right here, let's fight. This is a war. We're doing this war thing. But wait. Atofe, what about the stuff that you normally do? What are you talking about? That was the stage show. We're done with that. Let's move on. But again, it can also be you're wearing that fighting god armor. Why are you wearing that? But she doesn't say anything about that. So I don't think that's going to necessarily be it. Again, I think it's because she concluded the story back there. And that's why she acted different in front of the ogre god. And that's why she's acting different right here. The rules are gone. The mold is gone. It's cool. It's cool stuff. Xander, the rest of the team caught up. There was Rudius, Edis, Cliff, Annalise, and more. That was heartening to Alex. Although it made his heart swell, he had to wonder if it was enough for a chance of victory. Nothing for it but to try. Master Rudius, fall back and get healed up. We'll hold him here. Alex felt Rudius was too focused on what was in front of him. The arch nemesis that he'd been pursuing. They'd been caught off guard, but were rallying. He couldn't have been any more wrong. But he wasn't going to listen to a recommendation of retreat. Without a plan, if they retreated, they'd be stuck. Alex didn't have an idea of what an adequate plan looked like. Yeah, that's the problem. It's not like they can all turn around and start running. They can't outrun this armor. Unless it has to stay in the ocean. I don't know. Maybe it has to stay in the ocean in order to cool down. It can't leave the ocean. I doubt it. No, because I think they allude to it showing up later on, which meant they really had to do this now. It wasn't that this was a bad idea on Rudius' part. Alex only saw it because of the fight that he'd gone through. With the might they had now, they couldn't beat the fighting god, Badigadi. Yeah, that's pretty much seen in a second. Their battle with Badigadi had began with Alex submerged in the ocean to his waist. Engaging him in close combat was Atofe and the Ogre God, as well as Edis and Rajerd. After Cliff healed up Alex, he supported from a distance. I'm very surprised that Cliff is there. Good boy Cliff. Even though later on it showed that he's like super terrified, it's like, of all these people on the battlefield, the last person I expected was Cliff. That's super cool. Best bro. Best bro going to fight the fighting god with his bro Rudius is Cliff. Against such a deadly enemy, they need to keep full situation in mind. Badigadi took them all on, with Geese riding on his shoulder. Even burdened by Geese, Badigadi handled his opponents as though they were toddlers. Alex could tell that his mother was mad. You wouldn't guess by looking at her, but she was fully initiated in the North God style. Their arts made great strides in the past few hundred years. On top of that, she was an immortal demon king. After however many thousands of years raining terror down on humans, her power was uncontested. Just her name was enough to make Demon King, who knew of her of old, tremble. Yet she was powerless against Badigadi, as were the other three. Edis' sword moved too fast for the eye to see, but she couldn't cut through Badigadi. Rajerd's dead-on hits were all parried. Badigadi dominated. Atofe's personal guard encircled him from a distance, fleeing magic, but it was as if every move was snuffed out before it could make contact. The guard's spells didn't reach Geese. Could it be the armor, or Geese had a magic item? Alex guessed the latter. As we find out later on, nope, it's the armor. It's the armor. He didn't know much about Geese, but he was sure that he'd done his homework. The man god was involved here, so it was best to assume that he had worked out a counter plan. In other words, first priority was to take down Geese. Unfortunately, you only had to look how badly Atofe was struggling to know that getting close to him was no easy task. Yeah, so it's kind of a sad reality here is to think that should be a priority. It shouldn't be Geese. I'll hit him with magic first. Back me up. After watching for a while, Rudius seemed to have made up his mind. Despite coming across as a bit of a coward, when the moment of crisis came, he wasn't running. As Rudius inhaled, Alex sensed the magic gathering in his hands. For a moment, Alex hesitated, unsure whether Rudius would catch the others in it. His target? Geese. Rudius had came to the same conclusion Alex had. It should have been simple to directly attack an opponent he had a clear line of sight on. Rudius raised his hands above his head, and a sudden gust of wind bellowed. Air cracked with unbridled magic. Alex saw the black clouds gathering over the dark sky growing. Rain began to fall, and in the distance a roll of thunder. Wind howled, stirring up the waves. It had to be cumulonimbus, except the spell was used solely on armies.
Even if it didn't work for the fighting god, it would do terrible damage to his allies. The ocean swelled. Atofe and the others looked like they were struggling. Mind you, only a little. Rudius must have intended to strike just beyond them with a king-tier spell, Lightning. Alex knew the process of compressing cumulonimbus before it was complete. This time, the clouds went on expanding. Tornadoes spun around them, and fierce winds and rain lashed at Alex's face. With his poor understanding of magic, Alex wouldn't have seen it, but he knew offensive strategy, and so he understood. Rudius was about to use a special technique. It's interesting because he immediately knows what cumulonimbus is, how it works, and then it kind of comes in, and then he's like, okay, then it's going to probably be lightning, and then he's like, okay, no, this is doing something really weird. It's supposed to be a special technique. So I literally thought that he was going to do something special. It seemed like he just overly compressed a lightning. Clouds filled the entirety of the sky. It was dark, and Alex couldn't see 50 meters in front of himself due to the rain. Even then, while he wouldn't have lost sight of his opponent, he wouldn't be surprised if these fighters had lost sight of Rudius. He, by contrast, had Eye of Distant Sight. The demon eye would no doubt be fixed, as usual, on the three fighters. Demon King Badigadi neutralized the power of demonic eyes, so he, and Geese on his shoulder, would be nigh impossible to make out. But Rudius had to be able to see Atofe, an ogre god, to know where to aim. Yeah, that was a question that I had, was just exactly how this potion that Badigadi had drank actually worked. Like, is it just literally creates this almost haze in this one area if you're using a demon eye, or is it like specifically just like your actual body does? So he's just seeing, he just sees like essentially geese just kind of floating in the air. This seemed to imply that like it's like an area of effect, which again kind of makes me wonder exactly what the man god would see if he's using his, look into the future. Is it any time that he's with Badigadi, it's just like a blur is in those moments, similar to Rudius being around Orsted or now with the bracelet? Which, yes, does technically make sense as to why here in a minute, Rudius just gets completely clobbered because he's not able currently, right now, Rudius is not able to use his Eye of Foresight. He wouldn't be able to see something coming. Granted, the question mark, would it even be able to detect it? Would it be so fast that literally, unless he maxes it out, is not going to be able to see a hit coming? And yeah, technically, when Rudius first dueled Badigadi at the university, yeah, he activated his Eye of Foresight, and literally, Badigadi wasn't there. He said where he was once, he's no longer there. And I really kind of, at the time, kind of assumed it was an aspect of similar to, like, Resurd, or when he was using it on Resurd had so many possibilities of directions he can go without, like, infusing the eye even more or learning how to control it more. You're not going to see. Like, there was limits to it. Orsted as well. There's just too many possibilities. You can't see what the hell's going to happen. So I assumed that was the case there, but yeah, specifically at that point, it said he wasn't even there. Not that there was possibilities and that it was a haze or whatever. He just wasn't there. Reese's raised hand closed into a fist. An accumulation of magic so enormous that Alex felt his hair stand on end, rose into the heavens. Just like that, the clouds contracted. Those clouds that seemed like they might cover the entire world vanished in an instant. Alex could see the moon. Rudius was waiting for this moment. Alex didn't say anything. He couldn't give Rudius a signal because he knew what he was doing. He wouldn't miss his mark. Atofe and the ogre god attacked at once, and Badigadi threw both of them back. For a split second, there was distance between them and the fighting god. That was the moment. Rudius swung his arm down. Lightning. It was like no lightning Alex had seen before. What came shooting down wasn't lightning. It was a pillar of light. The moment it materialized, all sound around them blotted out. For a moment, the rain stopped, and the world was engulfed in still, frigid brightness. Beneath the pillar of light, a vast tower of water rose. Then came to a thunderous rumble akin to thunder after an ordinary lightning, battering eardrums. And two, of earth. Through the roar, Alex heard Cliff's incantation. In response, Rudius began to prepare another spell. A mass water rushed towards Alex, obscuring his vision. The impact of the lightning spell had raised a tidal wave on an apocalyptic scale. The water rushed closer, sweeping up everything in its path. Sandstorm! It collided with a massive sand, and the two slammed into each other, each canceling each other out. Through the combination of Rudius and Cliff's magic, the water dissipated into brown rain, muddying the waters of the ocean and the beach. Alex watched the rainfall, then turned back to the fighting god. Straining his eyes, trying to locate a trace of gold, he found nothing. Did I get him? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm assuming this is implying that Cliff used Sandstorm, which that's an Emperor tier. I don't remember if they ever mentioned that Cliff was Emperor of Earth Magic, which either way is kind of interesting because, cool, props to him. I think they did mention that he has been obviously climbing a lot in a lot of this stuff, so it wouldn't shock me. It probably has mentioned it before. It's more interesting the fact that he immediately knows, or he's already preparing a counter. So this implies to me that he has been talking to Cliff about countermeasures. Like, maybe they could have possibly talked about it when they were rushing up here. But either way, it's like, to be that quick on the ball to do some sort of counter effect. Now, yeah, I do kind of question Why did it create an apocalyptic level tidal wave? Again, they're on the beach. Alex said that he was literally up to his waist in water. No matter what, that's not going to create an apocalyptic level of a tidal wave. It would have to be further out in the ocean to push that much water up on the ocean. It's fine. It sounds cooler this way. Shut up, Andrew. Have fun. But yeah, it's pretty cool that Cliff has that counter there. Did we get him? Reese murmured, perhaps not realizing he said it out loud. It wouldn't rob them of victory. But Alex felt it was a pretty unlucky phrase. Flag. Look, Alex has got to call out the flag. He knew it from experience. If you said that, you didn't get them. Well, I mean, it's just more of an aspect that you're pointing out the fact that you're unsure. The fact that you're kind of throwing out there hoping that something happens. You're either unsure about accuracy or the lethality of it. You're just throwing stuff. You're experimenting. Alex twitched, sensing something above him. Looking up, Edison Richard seemed to have sensed it too. A split second later, a pillar of sand materialized. Something was coming down from out of the sky. Even drenched in muddy rain, it sparkled gold. Rudius groaned, and it hit the ground in front of him. Even in magic armor, the golden armor was twice his size. Alex wondered if the face underneath the helmet was really the face he knew. That was a goner. A mud-drenched monkey-faced demon spoke from the shoulder.
I am the fighting god Badigadi, friend to the man god, heir to the name of the fighting god. I challenge Reus Greyrat to single combat.
No, thank you. That was easy. Look, Sander didn't even need to do that earlier. Just say no. No, I'm good. No, thank you.
Bahaha, you're wasting your breath.
There was no time to stop him. The golden armor's punch hit Rudius straight on. One hit was all it took. One hit, and the magic armor fell apart. Rudius was thrown into the sky, falling back onto the ground with a thud. Rudius! Edis's cry echoed around them. One hit. One hit, and it got... He just delete. Delete. It is so funny. I bet some people were laughing about that last volume as I was like, okay, yeah, my assumption is that Badigadi shows up in the armor and he comes out there and then Rudius and him have to like fight it out for like a long time. And I don't know, maybe eventually Badigadi gives up at some point or he talks some sense into them as they're fighting. No. Gone. Which does technically lead into my theory at this point, since Rudius got this knocked out. And again, we're going to get into the whole aftermath of this whole situation. This is it. Like this punch right here ended the fight. This round one's done. Let's just face it. Round one's done. They're gonna struggle for a little bit so that everybody can get away. Round one is done. What's next? Rudius is going to keep bringing up this idea of he's got a special weapon, which I freaking hate, by the way. We'll get into that later. His special weapon. I'm assuming because we've pretty much confirmed at this point, this is the old one. This is the old version 1. Now, we're wondering if it was a copy because it kind of words it as copy. That could be a 7 Seas moment. This is version 1. He's got version 2, but version 2 is not enough. Roxy was working on something, so I'm thinking the secret weapon is going to probably be version 3. I'm assuming Rudius is going to get version 3 eventually. And at that point, yeah, I don't know. Version 3 could be really insane. Because again, we're adding Roxy's knowledge to the mix. And version 3 could be hopefully up to the levels of this thing. But this thing, they're putting so much emphasis. This thing is incredible. And yes, technically something that Laplace has worked on for a long time, presumably. Like Laplace was building this to kill a god. And so he would presumably been working on it for a long, long time. It took down entire armies without being, worked out. But yeah, also Laplace has the mana pool that Rudius is currently aspecting. So he does have a massive mana pool too. But yeah, one punch down, one punch man, Badigadi, and that was gone. I don't know, there's a side of me that was not expecting that, but there was a side of me that did kind of think that this could be the route it'll go, and the idea of having all this confidence in this armor, and just like that. It just more sucks the fact that we really haven't gotten much use out of this armor except for the initial fight, and then yes, beating up a bunch of weak old church boys. Beating up the magic armor version 1 that beats up poor church boys. Anyways, have you ever seen someone mauled, then tossed out like an old rag? Alex has. He's seen it more times than he can count, and done it to people with his own hands. He was on the giving side this time. Just now, the majestic magic armor had been torn to scrap metal. Reese tumbled from it like a rag doll. He was face down at first, so Alex couldn't see him. But he was at least ragged enough for scrappy regulars at a tavern to laugh and say, "Looking handsome, boy." Over the following 10 seconds, the rest of their side fell to pieces. Atofe exploded. attack leaving only her legs behind, and now she had to regenerate. Of course, she'd be back and cackling before long. The ogre god had been beaten black and blue, arms broken. Ogres are hard to kill, but going off the amount of blood coming from his mouth, if he didn't get healing soon, he was going to die. This makes me believe that at least the ogre god's going to die right here. With Rudius down too, morale plummeted. Edis ran to Rudius' side, calling out to him as she held her sword at the ready. Rijerd wasn't a coward, but he was visibly shaken at Rudius' fall. Cliff had lost his nerve, and Ellen's shield was shattered, forcing her to withdraw. Moore would fight on to the death for Atofe, but without her, it looked like he decided to retreat. The time had come. Alex reached down and picked up his mother's sword, the sword of the Demon King, Atofe, one of the 48 magic swords crafted by the great demon swordsmith, Julian Harsko. This was the magic sword, Jawbreaker. That gruff old mule of a smith had made it as an offering to Atofe in Kalman's honor. Apparently she had shown a rare display of gravitas when she accepted it. From that day forth, she kept it on her person at all time. She'd never let anyone else wield it. With it, Alex could let loose a little. Yeah, that's interesting. The fact that he presented it to her as an offering in Kalman's honor. I guess that's the easiest answer is because it's Kalman. She's going to accept it with gravitas. But I don't know, there might be something more significant than that, or that she felt that it was more genuine than really anything else. Because anybody can win her over just by saying, in the name of Kalman, I thank you for your help, or in the name of Kalman, I would love your help, whatever. Master Rijerd, Master Moore. The two of them glanced at Alex for a second. They couldn't give their full attention, but listened. I'll make an opening for you. Fall back. All heroic epics come to an end. Fairy tales close on the great finale after vanquishing the evil Demon King. But reality wasn't so generous. Almost always, the end was quite tedious. You challenged an enemy greater than yourself, or you fell for someone's plot, or else you were challenged by the new hero. You lost, died. That's how it was for Alex's father, North God Kalman. And your son. And your son. No matter how incredible or strong a hero might be, so long as they engaged in war, defeat, and death were sure to catch up with them. A hero, after all, is heroic. Even when they know the hero dies in the end, people light up at his glorious exploits. The hero always imprints itself on their hearts. Alex felt his death here wouldn't be written down anywhere though. Just like his father, North God Kalman. The death Kalman went to was never written down. Yeah, again, it said that he went to the Dragon King realm and died there. But I'm like, I don't remember if we've said what happened there, but it's kind of confirming it here. Yeah, it was never written. But this is kind of a sad thing here. Again, I hate this because it feels like this is really flagging that Sander's dead here. And again, if he doesn't die again here, it's going to be like, this is the second fake out you've done with him, saying like, yeah, it's dead, it's done, he's going to his death, it's done, he's going to his death. But this is a sad reality here, is that yes, that everybody loves talking about these great epic tales, but nobody really knows whatever kind of befalls them. But I think if this is end up being the actual flag, that he does die, it sort of gives me a feeling that somebody like Norn will probably talk about him. Like it'll be one of those things where Alex believes that he'll never be seen as a hero, but then you'll have, yes, his death is here, but then somebody like Norn will write a story about what Alex did. Here's the story about North God Kalman II and what he did in this fight, how he held the line or whatever. There'll be definitely somebody writing epic tales, and it's already kind of lined Norn as being sort of the one that writes all the tales. I feel bad about her telling the story about her brother being a pervert, though. You can leave that stuff out. Don't worry about Norn. He looked up to his father. Why not go the same way? He'd go up against an enemy they had no hope of defeating and go down in a blaze of glory. It wasn't the death he pictured for himself, but whose death was. In my left hand, a sword. I knew at the moment I see it, he's gonna do the Excalibur. Here comes the Excalibur. In my left hand, a sword. It had been a while since Alex said that out loud, and he hoped that he didn't choke or stammer. In my right hand, a sword. He gripped the hilt with both hands. Power bubbled up from the pit of his stomach, flowing out of his body. He set his sights on the raging golden armor. With these, mine arms, countless lives shall I claim, and 100 million deaths I deliver. The words he had said countless times in his life, when the crucial moment came, he told himself that once he had spoken those words, defeat was out of the question. And yet it seems like you're accepting loss. Defeat was out of the question. He hadn't spoken them once since he gave up on being a hero. Even after all this time, as he went to meet defeat, he was surprised at how they flowed off his tongue. I am the North God, Alex Ryback. Prepare yourself. This would be his final battle. So, he'd make it count. Stop it, Refugin. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Yeah, Sander is definitely one I don't want to die. Alex/Sander is definitely a character I don't want to croak. Especially after this last bit right here. Again, it's so interesting how similar it is to Alec, and the idea that the two of them wanted to be heroes, at some point realize what a hero is, and then almost have this conflict as to how they're going to go forward, but it always comes up at the end. It always comes up at the end. Something changes at that final moment. It is literally the idea of at the end of the road, at that point of which you meeting possibly death or meeting death, you have some sort of change in your mind of how you see things, and suddenly you want to do this instead. Let's do this instead. This is the shift. This is the pivot. Suddenly clarity comes to your mind and what's important and what you do going forward. Never wanting to pick up a magic sword again, suddenly picking it up. Now's the time. But now, I'm dead. Now, I'm going to go down the blaze in glory. Can I even get through this? Probably not. Will people tell tales of me? Probably not. Norn will. Nornal will. I don't want it. I don't want it. Stop it, Refugin. But again, if he's still alive after this, I'd be like, stop flagging it, dude. Stop it. Switching perspectives to Rudius, we're finally done talking about Alex. When Rudius came to, he smelled something good. It was a little sweaty, but pleasant and familiar. In the corner of his eye, he saw rippling red hair, just as he felt warmth on his cheek. Something had pressed against it. Are you awake? Awareness rushed back to him. Edis was carrying him on her back. What's going on? Rudius jerked up, looking about. A few others, looking like refugees, were walking with them. Cliff, Elise, Richard. We lost. Edis sounded bitter. They had gone in again against the fighting god, only to be beaten to a pulp. Edis had backed out after one hit, and Elise's shield was shattered. Atofe and the ogre god had put up a valiant fight, but the fighting god had thrown them off and off again. Because Rudius was down, Moore had ordered retreat. Richard retrieved Edis and Rudius. With Atofe and a personal guard, the ogre god, and Sander covering their retreat, they got away. Right. Rudius was reeling. They'd lost. Just like that. He didn't think of himself as the toughest guy around or anything. The first time he took version 1 out against Orsted, he lost then too. He knew he wasn't invincible. Still, his confidence had been bolstered by a run of victories. He'd beaten Atofe and Alec. Alec not alone, but a win was a win. He still always tried to consider the possibility of loss. This was his first one-punch knockout. No. Orsted went one shot. Orsted went one shot. I mean, yes, technically there was a couple like exchange there, but no, that was a dead. No, he crushed his lung first, but he was gonna let him live. All right, it's still a one. I still call it a one hit. I still call it a one hit kill. This is the first time he had been blown to smithereens and knocked out cold in a single hit. No, Badigadi did that too, and Badigadi did it too. Badigadi knocked him out in one punch too. The first time he met him. So this is the third one, Rudy. Do I keep counting? Do you want me to keep counting? And Edis has done it several times too. And they keep popping. Moments when Rudius has been knocked out in one hit keep popping in my head. Edis has done it like 50 times at this point. Probably 100 times at this point. Come on, Rudy. Do you want me to keep going? I want to make a list over here. Just kind of break it down every time that Rudius has been one shot. Okay, stop. Keep moving on, Andrew. Stop thinking about it. Had he underestimated Badigadi? Had he thought, fighting god or not, the Demon King would still pull his punches? I mean, I can see that, but my assumption there was that you don't have a choice. Sander just gave me cover. I'm going to go over here, get my stuff, and come back. It's not like I'm going to go, well, guys, I don't think we can beat him. Should we go back? I mean, Sander's back there. Should we? I mean, you kind of want to, because then you can utilize Sander in combat. Like, use as many allies as you can. But I can see that, too. Badigadi pulled his punches before. Is he going to do it again? Question mark. And it seemed like he was. I think if he went all out like that from the very beginning, they would all be dead like that. But it seemed like it wasn't until Rudius dropped that lightning that suddenly he's like, okay, done. Start knocking out everybody. At first, I kind of thought that was the point in which Badigadi finally lost his mind. But then he starts talking. He asked Rudius for a duel. What's your next move? Rudius thought about it. What next? He wouldn't have said they're all options. But there was no way any smart-ass plan that he came up with could beat the fighting god. He didn't have much faith in their firepower. Glancing around told him Sander, Ogre God, Atofe, and her personal guard weren't with them. They could be dead. That left Edis, Richard, Cliff, Elise, and the superb warriors if they counted. Rudius wouldn't count himself as reliable firepower without his armor, and was more of a liability. All they can do was make a river, mountain, and set the mountain on fire, like the folktale, the 3 Lucky Charms. After drinking up the river, leaping over mountain, and putting out the fire, the fighting god would come chasing after them, just like the witch in that story. They couldn't win with their current lineup. Rudius, we have no choice but to flee. Richard was looking Rudius in the eye. Richard, he's one of the 7 great powers. The real thing. We can't win against him, even with all of our strength combined. So they'd run away. Back to the superb village. Then what? In the 3 Lucky Charms, the boy ran to a temple where the priest used his wiles to beat the witch. They did have a priest, Orsted, back in the village. And yet, the fighting god and geese wanted to kill Rudius and use up Orsted's power. If Orsted fought the fighting god, he would use more mana than he would in a fight with North god or Sword god. No question, if that happened, they'd lose the war. Those two would chase them to the ends of the world to achieve their goal. There's nowhere they could go and be safe. That's sort of the interesting thing there. And they sort of alluded to it with what Geese said, or what the conversation between Geese and Badigadi. Technically, there is one way to lose, but it would probably end in the world ending. Because, again, right now, Badigadi is a ticking time bomb. It's like one of those aspects that they're not talking about it here, but technically they have to stop Badigadi, or he could probably just end the world. The moment that Badigadi loses his mind, the question mark is what happens to him after that? Does he go crazy and just start blasting everything and thus just run around destroying everything? Because again, he's an unending machine of death. But there is like a mindset here where, okay, all you have to do is just kind of grab your family and just go. Because the moment that Badigadi loses his mind, does he even go after Orsted? Does he even go after Rudius at that point? Or does it just become this thing that just destroys things endlessly? Even if we run, we can't win. Then all we can hope for is to fight and die with honor. When you fought and died for honor and lost, you still lost. You didn't get to call that a win. When you died, that was it. Rudius, pull yourself together. Edis squeezed Rudius' hand, her grip warm and firm. She saved him more times than he can remember with those hands. She'd held their child with those hands. I like this. Edis is like, this isn't my Rudius. Where's Rudius? It's like she literally turns up like, okay, where's my Rudius? Rudius, wake up. Right. Rudius calmed himself and thought, how could they win? They need information before anything. If the fighting god armor had a weak point, for example, that'd do nicely. Unfortunately, as the story told it, that armor was the strongest in existence, crafted by Laplace himself. He'd gone down trying to beat his own creation. Finding a weak point probably wasn't happening. Even if they had any, there was still other strategies, ways to fight it. Rudius might be able to find out something about that. Who knew about the armor? Atofe wasn't here, which left Orsted. He'd have to ask him. If things turned out that he didn't know anything, whether Orsted knew or not, Rudius would still have to fight the enemy here and now. They'd lost Atofe, the ogre god, and Sander, but there had to be a way to win. That said, Rudius wanted to keep their casualties to a minimum. Rudius didn't want Superb Village caught up in the crossfire. Norm was there too. He couldn't let her fight. There had to be a chance, even with only a fraction of a percentage. Then it came to Rudius. He still had one trump card in his hand. Like I said, the only thing I can think of is another armor. He figured he'd use it earlier. But I don't know, did Roxy had enough time to build a whole nother armor? I mean, it could have been prototyped beforehand, because I think they alluded to it before. But that's the only thing I can think that Roxy is doing. And the reason why it's taken this long, the only thing I can think of is that she is trying to finish an armor, version 3. And that's what's taken her so long, is that she has to put that together. Which, where would she get the mana for that? Because again, they have to infuse that stuff. And if she's having to create or finish an armor, and then do a second teleportation, because he had to use teleportation to get away from there, and they're gonna have to use it again. Girl's gonna be expended by the end of it. She's probably gonna pass out. No. Technically, she can get like Sylphie's help with mana supply over there. So that technically is that, if Sylphie's even there. And yes, technically Sylphie can help with infusing armor too. So they have, I guess technically, well, no, she can actually go to the university and have them bring a bunch of people to infuse the stuff with mana. I mean, she could use resources. She has probably a lot of people at the university that can help out. We'll fall back to the forest and buy time. He would stake everything on this. Got it. The others all nodded. And yeah, I'm getting frustrated with the fact that, and this is so funny that Refugian does this a lot with Rudius. It's like he keeps thinking of, there's been several times in the past where like he has this one thing. I can use that one thing. I have that one trick. And he keeps bringing it up in his head, and it's like, nobody would think about, I have that trump card that I'm not going to, in my mind think about. I have a trump card. I have a secret weapon, because eventually you're going to forget that. What is the secret weapon again? I don't know. I keep thinking about how it's a secret weapon that I'm never going to tell myself in my brain, because somebody's reading my brain apparently right now. They made their way back to the Superb Village. His trump card still hadn't showed up. All things going to plan, he'd expect it to be here already. Maybe something had gone wrong. They didn't have time to wait around for it. Pushing his worries aside, he knelt before Orsted to report on what happened until yesterday. Yeah, I'm assuming everything around Roxy is, again, initially he sent her to build a teleporter to swap places with the magic armor. So they knew where the version 1 was. They just had to recreate the scroll because, again, it was in the Vanir, it was destroyed. So she had to recreate that scroll. And I think that she swapped places with it. She teleported there and it replaced it. And then when she got to the other side, she essentially probably had to go to the armor. And then this is going to be his secret weapon, version 3, is she's probably having to gather people because they're probably going to have to load that up with mana and finish it. It's probably taking so long because it's not finished. She probably told him, hey, I'm going to go ahead and secure your other armor too. It's almost done. and he doesn't know exactly how much work she has left to do on it. So she's having to gather people to probably build the rest of it. And then once it's finally finished, she's got to then build another teleporter to get it back over here again. And I would assume that they'd probably use the teleporter that's next to the Superb Village to come back. She's got to recreate it. But again, that's going to go by memory, which I think Rudy has created those ones. I don't know. Either way, poor girl's going to be worn out. Or she contacts Petagoose and asks Petagoose for help on behalf of Rudius, which would be huge. If she gets Petagoose's help, that would be huge on both Petagoose's side and her side. But again, I think it's just really, she got to finish it and then she got to get back over here. If it ends up being a freaking fighter jet or something like that, I'm going to literally throw this book. If it turns out to be some cheesy modern technology weapon, I'm going to throw this book. Refugin, I'm tired of everything looking like mechas and Gatling guns in a medieval setting. Stop it. Freaking Roxy rolls up in a freaking diesel truck or something, or a crane. There's Roxy got this massive like crane comes in because she knows what a crane looks like. I'm gonna be so mad if it's some stupid dorky modern technology thing. It's gonna be a nuke. She like shows up with an atom bomb. Anyways, that brings us up to speed. The Ogre God, Atofe, and Sander are all missing. Orsted's face was stormy.
Fighting god, Badigadi, you say?
Is there any strategy to beat him?
No. The fighting god armor, I know, but I have never fought Badigadi wearing it.
Oh, I see. Which implies he knows about the fighting god armor, which we find out he's wore it. And he's technically fought Badigadi before, just never Badigadi wearing it. It was the answer Rudius expected, but he couldn't help but be disappointed. Not that he'd let Orsted see that. Then would you tell me what you know about the fighting god armor?
It is the strongest armor ever created, forged by Laplace. It was buried in the depths of the Devil's Cave, in the middle of the Ringus Sea. The mana that radiates from the surface makes it glow gold, and it makes the wearer unstoppably powerful. Because of the abundance of mana, however, it possesses a mind of its own. It will possess anyone who wears it.
Badigadi didn't seem like he was possessed. Badigadi looked like he was acting on his own free will. He acted exactly as Rudius remembered. Of course, maybe he just appeared that way, and the armor was actually in control. He hadn't given Atofe or Sander the time of day after all.
It takes time for the armor to possess the wearer. The longer they wear it, the stronger the armor's hold on the mind becomes, until they cease to be able to tell right from wrong, craving nothing but to do battle. Badigadi has an unusual immunity to powers of the demon eyes, so it's possible the armor will be unable to possess him.
I didn't catch that the first time. Okay, there's two things here. Two things of note here. Specifically in the writing of this, it says it takes time, quote unquote, it takes time, Orsted said slowly, for the armor to possess the wearer. Yes, it does get into later on that he has wore this thing, but I think there is an element of like how he says this slowly gives me a mindset that he's not liking talking about this, which does give me the indication that Orsted had, yes, you already know, he has wore it before. Orsted has worn this armor before, but it's not comfortable to talk about, which makes me believe that he probably wore it and it may have possibly took control of him and caused him to screw something up. It wasn't a good experience, is what it tells me. Yes, the second thing here is this is claiming that he has an immunity to it, and thus he might not be possessed. That can't be right. That second part cannot be right. Now, this is assumption by Orsted, but we as the readers know that the first time he wore it, he had already drank the potion that made it to where he was not seen by the demon eyes. He wore the armor and then went over to Kishirika and lost his mind and attacked Laplace. So we already know that Badigadi can be possessed. Simple. But yeah, specifically kind of intriguing the idea that Orsted's saying this slowly. Give me an indication this is uncomfortable to talk about, or something that he doesn't want to talk about, or something where he's trying to... I guess it could be that he's trying to recall things. So Badigadi hadn't been wearing the armor for that long yet. Rudius also had the feeling he had heard this kind of possession somewhere before. I don't know what Rudius is referring to here, unless he's talking about like old manga or light novels.
Unlike yours, however, the wearer cannot take it off until the last of their life force has been exhausted. In Badigadi's case, I expect it will be operate almost indefinitely. The moment the wearer puts it on, it transforms to fit them. They can also generate their preferred weapon. The range is limited to that weapon's typical range, but I doubt Badigadi will choose a long-range weapon. The golden light emitted from the surface of the armor neutralizes most magic, although it doesn't have a threshold. If you hit it with your strongest stone cannon you can cast, it might get through.
That is interesting. I mean, that's kind of flagging it. I can see them totally fighting at some point, and Rudy gets some range on him, and then suddenly Badigadi generates a ranged weapon or something like that. But interesting that it points that out. I mean, I've been curious for a while now what sort of weapon Badigadi will end up using towards the later parts of it, and I still felt like there was a flag there that way early on, Geese was putting together a weapon, and that weapon would be used by Badigadi, and that he'd be using that weapon to take out people like Atofe and whatnot. I'm kind of at the point now where I think that that's going to be used by Geese. Like, I can totally see, like, Badigadi and him duking it out, and at some point, maybe Badigadi either finally loses or gives up, and then it'll be a face-off between Rudius and Geese. Not really a face-off, just necessarily a confrontation. Like, at some point, we're going to have Rudius and Geese standing before each other and talking, or sit down with each other and talk. There's going to be a conversation at some point between the two of them. And that'll be the point where Geese reveals, yeah, hey, man, I did what I could to get rid of everything, every tool that Mangod could use, just as a final flip you F off to Mangod before I die. I'm tired of being used by him, you know, counter to every single inner conflict or inner thought process I've had for like the last 5 volumes. I rug pulled the Mangod. There you go, boss. I helped you out as a thank you. Have a good life. I think it's probably going to turn to the thing where he's going to use the sword. Whatever sword that Geese used, he's going to use it. He's just going to bust it out the last second and go to stab Rudius as one last ditch effort, possibly pulling it off. But with the fact that this armor can generate a preferred weapon, which is OP, by the way, that makes me believe that he's not going to use that sword. And that, again, leads me to believe that Geese is going to use it. Because the sword god, Galfalion, he used his own sword. Again, Kalman III, Alec, he used his own sword. So who's using that sword? It's got to be Geese or Badigadi. So, but yeah, this was odd because it says, like your magic armor, the fighting god armor uses mana of the wearer as fuel. Am I misremembering? When they first introduced the magic armor, I think it was when the moment that Badigadi talks about when he first found the armor, or when it told that tale of him getting the armor, I thought it implied back then that it was exuding mana, like it was giving mana. I guess that could have been an aspect of like he felt an aura coming off of it, like this power generating off of it, which could be to the idea of like it creating that barrier or whatever, that magic is flowing off of it. I just probably misread that. But it has to be that way because if it draws the mana and it runs indefinitely, wouldn't it eventually draw all of Badigadi's mana out? I mean, he regenerates, but it's not as like he's producing mana faster than it can absorb. So I don't know. That doesn't seem right. Orsted knew a lot, and he was being talkative for a change. So Stone Cannon would have been more effective than Lightning. He'd messed up. Though, he didn't know that at the time. Who was wearing it the last time he fought it?
One of the sea merfolk. They ran out of mana and died quickly.
It's like this grand entrance. Orsted's walking on the beach side, and this magic armor steps up onto the beach, and Orsted's like,
What is that? That's never been in any of the loops.
and it just flumps over, and this little fish tail just kind of flapping around, and it just clonk. Anyways, mental image. Were there any others?
I have done it myself several times.
Several times.
I have also seen one human wear it, and one demon.
Okay, so to get specific, how do I beat it?
I do not know.
Interesting. One human wear it. Well, I mean, this is obviously going to be probably the previous loops. I don't know how we can draw to any conclusion on any of these ones. You don't?
When you wear the fighting god armor, you feel neither weariness nor pain. You are always fighting at your full potential. However, you are only ever moving it under your own physical power, and it has no ability to heal the wearer if they are wounded. Thus, if you have any way of damaging it, a battle of attrition may prove effective.
However, that was impossible against Badigadi. The fighting god armor kept going until the wearer died, and Badigadi was immortal. They had a perpetual motion machine on their hands. Yeah, I thought there was something in that. When it says that, however, moving it under your own physical power has no ability to heal the wearer, it's just basically saying there that you can't think of what to do. So if your arm breaks, you can't just think for it to do something. You have to move the body. The point there is that your body has to be healthy and functioning, thus you have to be physically well. And with Badigadi, since he's immortal, if he loses an arm, he can grow it back. That's what it's getting to there. I thought there was something else there. How did Laplace defeat it?
He hit it with an enormous output of magic that overshot its threshold, temporarily annihilating the wearer and separating them from the armor. It created a great rift in the continents that became the Ring of Sea.
Oh, so it was possible to do damage to it. With a strong enough attack, Badigadi would just regenerate afterwards. Instead of dying, gave Rudius an idea.
I heard the wearer back then died. I imagined it must have been Badigadi all along.
You didn't know?
They say that even Laplace didn't know who wore the armor during the battle. I heard they died and had no interest in finding out more. The fighting god has never challenged me as an enemy like this before.
Did you hear that from Laplace himself in the past loop?
Yes, that. And that I am the son of the first dragon god. And that the first dragon god was the one that laid the curse upon me.
Interesting. I mean, that makes sense that Laplace would be the one that would have told him. Laplace would probably be the one that would have that information and would be like, hey, this is what's going on. This is how you got the curse. This is who you are. He probably already knew what he was going to do, what his goal was to do, but Laplace was the one that gave him basically everything. Now, again, he could have been the one that told him what his goal was. Interesting. Again, it makes sense. It makes sense that Laplace would have been the one, and yet you have to kill Laplace?
Correct. To reach the man god, I must kill the 5 dragon generals and retrieve the sacred treasures.
Finally, Rudy fell silent. This had to be the first time that he heard Orsted say that flat out. He had to kill the dragon generals. So that was the deal. They couldn't count on Petagus to send reinforcements then. Rudy wouldn't want to ask for aid from someone that he stabbed in the back later. You've asked Petagus for help so many times. Why is this one different? I don't... It's fine. It's fine. I still, to this moment, don't understand what this sticking point is. It's never been a sticking point before, and I don't know why it's a sticking point now. Again, especially since the fact that that thing can go crazy, and it can kill everybody. Continuing his line of questioning now wasn't going to do Rudy any good.
That's an unpleasant subject for you, I expect.
Well, Rudy focused on what was in front of him. First, Badigadi. The man god acted based on how he saw his own future. A free-spirited and rambunctious pawn like Badigadi would be tricky to control. Maybe this unpredictability was the man god's true trump card. Rudy's just seen the man god for the first time in a long time, and he looked pretty haggard, like he was stuck in a tough spot. Fighting god Badigadi. If Badigadi had been man god's disciple all along, Rudy didn't know why the man god hadn't made use of him in any previous loops. I would guess that's because Geese had to win him over. Geese in proxy won him over, not the man god. Assuming this time they dragged it out of him, if it didn't happen in the previous loops, then odds were the man god was reacting directly to Rudius. Yeah, sure. Just like with Geese. That was the reason why he was able to find this trump card that was Geese. Rudius brought it out of him. Now, I am kind of wondering at this point, I kind of mentioned a little bit in the chat last week because I forgot to mention it in the last Mushoku Monday. I am kind of wondering at this point, is the man god even in a bad position? Because I mentioned in the last Mushoku Monday, it's interesting how literally Refugin has been constantly telling us that the man god's going to lose. Again, with the meeting with Badigadi, man god is losing. When Rudius meets up with the man god is losing. Every time somebody talks to the man god, he's losing. In this current segment here of these chosen disciples, the man god is going to lose. Why would the writer tell us the final battle, hey, by the way, Rudius wins? Two things. One, that yes, it could be that he wins at what cost. Rudius wins at what cost? That's the question mark. You already know that he wins, but at what cost? The other side of it is the man god lying? The man god figure out the best way for me to win is to act like I'm losing, and it pushes them harder to win. If I told them that I'm winning, they won't try hard and I die. But if I tell them that I'm losing, then I'll win because they'll underestimate me. I don't think the man god's that clever. I mean, he's diabolical, he's manipulative. He technically manipulated Rudius for a long time. It wasn't really manipulative because Rudius seen through it all the time. Rudius constantly called him out for being a little door-to-door salesman, that he was creepy and all this kind of crap. So I don't know, maybe he's not really he's not a good actor. Rudius typically sees through it all the time. I mean, I was sus of him from the very beginning. But what if he is a really talented manipulator? I don't see it. But it could be. It could be at the end, suddenly he pops up and says, "Hey there, how'd you like my plan? You thought I was losing. I was never losing. You're an idiot." I don't know, he seems like he's super mad though. Like, especially with Badigadi, he gets super mad. It's hard to believe that's all an act.
What are you going to do?
I'll fight. There's nowhere to run.
Very well, I shall join you. I have never fought this particular battle before, but I surely cannot lose.
Orsted stood, but Rudius moved to stop him. Please, not so fast. Orsted sat back down. So Orsted, if you use up your mana, we might as well have lost.
We also lose if you die here. A waste of a good progress, as you say.
True. Should they seize the day today or tomorrow?
they fought their way this far. Rudius at least wanted to stick it out until it really seemed like all was lost. Even if you do have to fight, I can at least soften the fighting god up for you first.
You'll die.
Then, take care of my family for me. Rudius didn't want to die, wanted to live and go home. But this, he was sure, was where everything came to a head. The fighting god was Geese and Man God's final play. The Man God might have something up his sleeve, but they'd taken down the others. All of his cards down were flipped. It'd have to hurt if they took down the fighting god too. They'd have to stick it out, fight, and win.
Very well. But if you see you cannot win, you must not hesitate before retreating. Am I clear?
Thank you. Rudius bowed his head and stood. Also, any word on Roxy?
Not yet.
All right. If you hear anything, please let me know right away. Orsted nodded, then left the building. Outside, warriors were waiting for Rudius. It's so crazy how much Orsted's changed. I mean, this has been something they've been showing plenty of signs of, but I just love that. He's down. He doesn't know what to do. Orsted, no hesitation, gets up. I'll go down. I'll help. Let me get involved. Like, Rudius keeps telling him, stay behind, don't come, stay there. If you use up your mana, it's bad. He knows that. Orsted told him. But it's so funny, it's so flipped now. Before, Orsted said, I'm going to take you into my service. Rudius, go out there and do things for me because you wasted my mana. You'll be useful to me. Do these things, and I'm going to regenerate. Do things that I would normally do because I need to regenerate for this last fight. And it turned quickly into Rudius going, I can't use his mana. I gotta do this alone. I can't use his mana. I gotta do this alone. Orsted never really says anything for the longest time, and then now suddenly right here, Orsted's saying, let me get involved. And Rudius is saying, no, don't, because if you use your mana, it's bad. Rudius, let me get involved. Hey, if it goes bad, get out of there. Orsted is not hesitating to help Rudius here. And I think it is because there's a switch here. It used to be Orsted's conserving for this final fight because nothing matters but that final fight. Every time something goes bad, Orsted wants to give up on this loop. And Rudius says, please don't give up on the loop. If you give up, Man God's going to come kill me. Now suddenly, it almost like it's turned to, the loop is lost, but at least I can sacrifice myself to make sure that Rudius has a good rest of his life on this loop. It's almost like Orsted wants to sacrifice himself for the sake of Rudius at least having a good rest of his life. Which, yes, brings me back to my original theory that I think that the story is going to end with Orsted sacrificing himself. I think Orsted is going to die in the end. I think he will die for the sake of Rudius. Because technically now Rudius knows how to get to the Man God. They technically don't need Orsted. Now, Orsted could have an insane amount of mana that they need in order to open that gate. But the assumption is that the door opening is just the keys. And once they get the keys open, that Orsted has some god-slaying ability that he's supposed to use. But Rudius can put all that together. He can prepare all that stuff for somebody later on. He can put together, again, the Quagmire Rudius band, have them prepare over time those keys, get it from Laplace, open that gate, get to the Man God, and do what Orsted was originally going to do. Orsted's still going to loop back, unless they do some kind of special way of killing him, which I also had a theory on that. I mean, who's to say the blade that Geese was putting together back there is a way of killing Orsted permanently? I'm not sure how Man God would know that. Again, that could be all the big rug pull of, oh, I was planning everything and I knew everything. Or it could just be simply that, yeah, it just was a side effect of it. Either way, it could be a way of killing Orsted, even if it is to loop back. And then Rudius is forced to have to kind of stand on his own without Orsted, and then he could put everything into effect that Orsted was planning on doing. It could easily go that route. I can easily see it going that route. Anyways, I forgot where I was going with that, unless I got to that. Sometimes I go down the rabbit hole and I completely forget where the opening was. But again, I do love the fact that things have changed between Rudius and Orsted. Orsted has become such a Papa. Like Papa Orsted here, just taking care of everybody, taking care of Rudius' family. Rudius' family and him mean a lot to Orsted now, it seems. We also lose if you die here. A waste of good progress, as you say. Orsted's saying this. We lose if you die here. Technically, no. Technically, no. If Rudius died right now, they wouldn't lose. Because Orsted would still go on to open that door and bring in those kids to fight against the Man God. Unless it's in reference to the idea of the Quagmire band and how that's still technically necessary in order to build towards that eventual fight. I think, again, Orsted doesn't want him to die. A waste of good progress, as you say. I love it. I love it. Orsted nodded, then left the house. Outside, warriors were waiting on Rudius. Edis, her eyes sharp, and Aura, savage. Regered, with his air of serenity. Cliff, a little worked up, nervous, and fear in his eyes. My boy Cliff, dude, he's still standing there. He's worried. He's still standing there. Boy Cliff's still standing there.
Elise watching Cliff with a protective look. Doga, who'd heard Sander had fallen and seemed ready to cry. Oh, poor Doga. Oh, poor Doga. Zenoba, who was dressed in superb traditional garments after losing everything in the last battle. I want to pick. And finally, the superb warriors, here to protect the village. This was their lineup, and to be honest, it didn't fill Ruiz with confidence. The gap left by Sander, Atofe, and the Ogre God was massive. They were all on part with the 7 great powers, a class or 2 above the current members. Still, Doga and Zenoba were good substitutes for the Ogre God. Badigadi favored close combat, not a bad matchup. Except for they lost to the Ogre God. They were well matched in power when you consider them individually and together. But Ruiz wasn't sure how much that would matter. Meaning, not all their cards were losers. Still, they might be able to hold off the Fighting God for a day or 2. The chance of the trump card making it back before their bodies gave out weren't good. Even if it did arrive, there was no guarantee of victory. He might end up killing his allies for no reason. That kind of makes it sound like whatever his trump card is, which again I think it might be the version 3, what if the trump card is that it might strike others around him, like it's a weapon? Again, it better not be. It's gonna be a gun, isn't it? It's gonna be like a pistol or something stupid. What would possibly harm those around him? Makes it sound like a strike. That does technically play into what Orsted said. How we beat him is he overloaded it with mana. He overloaded the armor with mana. Let's go. Even so, this was it. He had a plan, but the odds were all against them. He had no proof he read things correctly. He might just have enough time to set a trap, but they wouldn't win against the opponent with parlor tricks. No one said anything. They just followed. They were all going into battle with a fighting god. And that is chapter 1. My gosh, I did not think I was going to cook that much. I literally did not think I was going to cook that much. Yes, technically, like the amount of the actual book that is for this outline right here is the usual. But I didn't think I was going to cook for that long. I was really kind of concerned that I wouldn't really have as much to talk about as I usually do, and this would be a quick Mushoku Monday. But no, there's just so much in this first chapter. Is this the rest of this volume? Is this? Because this first chapter is really good stuff. Again, the stuff around North God, getting into everything around Alex himself and his driving force and his ultimate sacrifice, getting into the armor itself, the completely one-sided fight there, getting into, yes, Orsted and his involvement with the armor. All this stuff is super juicy. I loved every single bit of this whole segment here. So if the rest of this volume's like that, holy crap, I'm on board. I'm super hyped for it. So good stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this first chapter as much as I did. My gosh, could this be another S rank volume? I mean, everybody's kind of hyping up the ending, so I'm hoping so. But yeah, like I said, my predictions at this point is, yeah, they're going to probably have another bout with them. And my assumption right now is that it's going to be a hold off, hopefully hold off long enough for Roxy to come back with version 3, or a car, or a motorcycle, or a bazooka. She's gonna come in with like a jet. We're gonna bring in a fighter jet. Anyways, probably version 3. And then when she arrives, Roos jumps into it, probably last second, probably gonna be like the last second. I'd be curious if possibly Orsted might have to step in as Ruiz is getting taken down. Orsted has to step in. Ruiz is knocked out. Ruiz regained consciousness. Roxy's there saying, hey, jump in the armor. And kind of find out Orsted's been holding him off because Orsted's trying to save Ruiz. Because again, I think at this point, Orsted is wanting Ruiz to survive this, even if his ultimate goal loses. He wants Ruiz to be able to live on happily. Even if Ruiz won't be able to take down the man god, as long as I can get Ruiz through this danger, so that he can live the rest of his life. So Orsted will probably hold him off enough for Ruiz to get the armor, come back in there. Orsted will probably get stabbed by Geese with the sword that he's been making. Because again, they haven't brought that up since then. Ruiz is going to be like, no. They're going to fight Badigadi. Ruiz will barely overcome Badigadi. Probably have to blast him really hard, just like Laplace did. And then Ruiz will face off against Geese and Stone Cannon. Hey, bud, I was all for the sake of living. I had to live. Stone Cannon. Anyways, yeah, that's chapter 1. My gosh, again, I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. I'm hoping the rest of this is gonna be like this. This is gonna be a cook fest. So I hope you're all ready. As they say, I'm gonna milk it. I'm just gonna accept that title now. I'm Mushoku Tensei's milker. I'm milking this whole book. I'm gonna milk it. Milking's for me is another way of saying I'm gonna cook the hell out of this, and I'm gonna have a lot of fun doing it because that's the stuff I eat up, and so many people say they love it too. So I'm happy. I literally did that. This was sitting on the desk, and I literally just casually just flipped my finger through it, and I caught myself. Don't do that. You're gonna see a picture you don't want to see. Anyways, that's it for this Mushoku Monday. I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. Really appreciate you guys' support, your kind words, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. It's because of you guys that this is what it is. You guys help this grow. Hit the like button. It's a good way of helping. Thank you guys so much. As per usual, greatly appreciate you guys' kind words, all that stuff. And yes, as per usual, greatly appreciate the people that support the channel monetarily, the Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. Love you guys to death. Until the next Mushoku Monday, you guys have a great, fantastic week. You have to wait until next week for chapter 2. We're going to cook it more. God, I'm getting so hyped for this. I've been holding off the hype. I'm getting the hype. It's building up. Y'all take care.
One of the sea folk, merfolk, the mana that it radiates,
There was nowhere they can go and be. There's no way that Rudius was looking Rudius in the eye. Rijard was looking Rudius in the eye. It was unthinkable that Alex should fear fear. It would be unthinkable that Alex should fear fear. Fear. He's basically it had to be cumulonimbus. I hate that word so freaking much. Cumulonimbus.